Hello, friends. This is Raman with your weekly Forex market analysis for the week of May 15th. Just a quick disclaimer before we get started. This is for educational purposes only. Should you have questions about your individual investment needs, I suggest you talk to your investment advisor. So we'll start by taking a look at the economic calendar, then we'll move on to the commitment of traders data, and finally we'll take a look at the technical analysis. Looking at our weekly calendar here, last week we had very little news that came out, and as a result, for the first few days of the week, we saw that the market moved sideways, didn't really do much. It was a very much of a range bound market till we saw some news come out towards the later part of the week and finally saw some movement in the markets. This week we have more news. We start the week off with a holiday in Europe, and going into the US session on Monday here, we have Empire State Manufacturing Index, which will be important. And then finally, in the Asian session, we have for Australian dollar monetary policy meeting minutes. Australia cut their interest rates by a quarter point, went from 2% to 1.75%. So these policy meeting minutes will shed some light on what the Reserve Bank was thinking behind cutting the interest rates, how they are viewing the market conditions, and what they plan to do after this. So market will definitely be keeping an eye on that. We also had inflation expectations for New Zealand dollar. Inflation is very important. New Zealand has not cut their interest rates, even though Australia has. So there is a lot of pressure on New Zealand to see whether they will cut their interest rates or how they're going to manage their currency. So that will be important this week here as well. For British pound, we have CPI number again, which is the inflation number. So that will be important. And for US, we have again CPI number and core CPI, which is again inflation numbers, very important, and manufacturing sales for Canada. Again, for New Zealand, we have GDT price index, which is the dairy prices. Again, one of the very important factors for New Zealand. We have PPI input, which is important data for New Zealand as well. Moving on to Wednesday, we have average earnings index and claimant count change, the unemployment numbers here. So will be very important for British pound. A lot of British pound data coming out this week. We have final CPI number for euro. So number of inflation numbers for this week here. We have US dollar crude oil inventories, and very, very important here, FOMC meeting minutes. At the last FOMC meeting, Fed Chair Yellen was quite dovish on the economy and the numbers that were coming out. So if we see more good data come out for the US dollar, the market may start pricing in an interest rate hike again here as well. So these meeting minutes will be very important to understand what was discussed in the FOMC meeting. And then we have employment change and unemployment rate for Australian dollar. Going into Thursday here, we have retail sales for British pound here. We have ECB monetary policy meeting accounts, which is again very important for the euro. Again, discussion around what the central bank is going to do around monetary policy for the eurozone. For the US session, we have Philly Fed manufacturing index and we have unemployment claims. We also have FOMC member Dudley speaking. And then going into Friday, we have core CPI and core retail sales numbers for the Canadian dollar. So a lot of inflation numbers coming out. The reason inflation numbers are important is because they influence the monetary policy for the central banks. So we'll keep an eye out on all these inflation numbers coming out this week. Moving on to commitment of traders data, we'll start with Euro US dollar. Here we see the leveraged money, the green line here, leveraged money has been decreasing their short position. So this week we saw a further decrease in the short positions. We have gone from 38,623 to 31,337. So a bit of a decrease in the short positions, which suggests a long position for the euro. However, we are seeing a little bit of a divergence here. We see the asset managers have actually decreased their long positions. They went from 33,761 to 30,888 in terms of their long euro positions. So overall, the asset managers are the pension funds and the big financial institutions that actually look at the more the longer term view. So this suggests that they are starting to decrease their positions. So even though for the short term this is bullish for the euro, we may be starting to see a turn. For the pound US dollar here, again, we see the leverage money short positions are decreasing. They have gone from 22,000 to 64.89. Quite a drop in the short positions for the leverage funds. And then we have asset manager. Again, here we see an increase in the short positions. So the asset managers have gone from 61,000 to about 70,000 in their short positions. So a bit of a divergence here. So over the long term, looks like the asset managers are expecting the British pound to go down. However, in the short term, this is still pointing towards bullishness. Looking at the Canadian dollar here, we see that the dealer positions have this blue line has gone really short, which would suggest a long otherwise. So leverage money positions have gone up and asset manager positions have gone up as well. So these are the long positions that have gone up, and accordingly the dealer short positions have increased. This still points to a bullishness for the Canadian dollar, which means dollar CAD, we're looking for it to come down. For New Zealand US dollar here, we see quite an interesting scenario. We still see the leverage money long positions have increased, which would point to a bullishness in New Zealand dollar. However, the asset manager short positions have taken quite a turn to the downside. We went from negative 75.40 to negative 17,849. So quite an increase in the short New Zealand positions, which would suggest that New Zealand dollar over the long term would be weaker. Looking at Australian US dollar numbers here, we see the leveraged money position, the green line, that have actually decreased from last week. We went from 53,432 to 40,189 in terms of the long positions. So long positions are decreasing, which would suggest that we are looking at bearishness in Australian dollar. Moving on to our charts here, we'll start off by taking a look at Euro US dollar. We see last couple of weeks, we see bearishness in Euro. We saw weekly candle close negative here. So for this week, our outlook for would be bearish here as well. So in terms of the support and resistance lines that we're looking at here, the next one is 1.1212, so about 1212 or 1220 area. Below that, we are looking at this support and resistance line, which is at approximately 1150. Looking at the daily Euro US dollar chart here, we did see quite a negative bearish close on the euro here, which would suggest further downside here. For in terms of a pullback, we could look at this 1350 level, back test of this level for, and if it stays below this, we'll be looking for a potential move to the downside. And here's our target, the 1200 1212 level, which is the bottom right here, and this pin. So that's a important support and resistance area. And below that, we could look at this 1.1440 or 50 area, this one right here. So those are a couple of the targets that we'll be looking at for this week. If the price does break through this 1350 level, we are looking at the price trading back into this range, and the upside could be 1.1450. So 1450 to the upside if it does manage to break through this 1350 level, or if it stays below this, if it pulls back into 1350, we are looking for a push back down into this 1200 level. Looking at the pound US dollar here, we did see quite a nice negative bearish close on the weekly candle, which would suggest a further move to the downside. And in this, the target that we are looking at is this 4065 area. Looking at the daily chart here, we did finally manage to break out of this range where price had been trading earlier in the week, and it did close to the downside. Now we have this whole move open. So before it gets to 4065 here, we would be looking for price to come to 4300 here and then further move down into this 4140-ish area. So those will be a couple of different levels, and then the final target that we're looking for here is 4050 level here. For Australian US dollar, weekly close was quite bearish again, so we would look for a pullback potentially even into the 7400 level or 7300 level, and then a further move to the downside. And the target that we're looking at is 7020 level here, or even further down. However, this will be the first target, the 7020 level. Looking at the daily chart, we did see a nice close to the downside here, and the pullback could be into the 7300 level or even all the way into 7400. And then we are looking at next target would be into this level, the 7100, and then further down into 7080 level, and finally into this 7020 level. New Zealand US dollar here, we did see it close down for the week, and now we'd be looking for further weakness in this here as well. So the target here is 6660 area. Looking at the daily close here as well, it did close to the downside. However, we do have the support and resistance line at 6750. So once it closes below that, we would be looking at 6715 area for the next target, and then finally into this support and resistance area at 6660. Dollar CAD here, it was a quite neutral close for the week. Price went up and then dropped off of that 130 level, and now we have to wait for this range to break. If it holds below this 130 level, we'd be looking for a move to the downside and potentially into this 2780 area. However, if it does break through this 130 area, the next target here would be 132.20. And if it breaks to the downside 2780, then we are looking for 125.70 area to the downside. So right now we would consider this as a range bound, and then we are looking for a break above 130 to trade it up into this 132 level, or if it breaks below 127.80, we would look for a move further to the downside. In the meantime, we're looking for a sell at 130 and a buy at 27.80. Looking at the daily chart, this is what we see. We did see a positive close on the day. We saw a rejection at the bottom and then a positive close. However, overall, it's still in this range, and that's why we are looking to trade this as a range, selling at the top of the range at 130.20 and then buying at the bottom of the range 127.80. And once it breaks above the range, the next one is 32.20, and if it breaks below the range here, we're looking for a potential move into 125.70 area or potentially into 12600. Before we leave here, just wanted to share the trade room details with you. We have a trade room every Tuesday to Thursday, 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. Eastern. As part of the trade room, you get a weekly market overview video. You also get a daily market analysis video from me. You can join me in trading live every Tuesday to Thursday, and we go through the top-down analysis. We look at the technical and the fundamental news that's coming out, and also we take live trades in the market. You can see my trade setups, where I'm entering and exiting trades, where I'm putting my stop loss, and where my profit targets are. You will also become a part of the private Facebook group for members only, and then you will also get media library access, where you will see a lot of trade examples of the best trade setups that I see. And as a bonus, you will get access to the pivot point indicator as well. The price is only $99 a month. This is a special promotion from a previous cost of $169 per month. And if you would like to join me, you can go to tradingwithvenus.com/work with me. I look forward to seeing you in the trade room.